Hello everyone. Today I'm going to show you how to analyze a poem for poetic devices and for meaning. It's important for creative writers to be able to read not only to gather information or enjoyment, but also to become a better writer. If you purposefully read to analyze a text, you will be more likely to be able to use similar devices in your own writing. But not to worry, because even if you do decide to emulate the work of a famous poet, your own unique voice will surely come out. So just to give you an overview of what you are about to observe, I want to show you this Prezi, because you all know that I love Prezis, about how to analyze a poem. So what you'll see me doing in a minute begins with step one, getting prepared. Do a bit of research to find out about the author of a poem. If you're not familiar with that author, then also have a list of poetic devices and their definitions handy. The next step will be to read the poem once through to get a good sense of flow and rhythm. Next, step three, go back to the beginning of the poem and do some text marking. For example, this could be tricky words that you need to look up if you're not familiar with them, notes on the meaning, or any other general observations that you have. Step four, look over notes to get a sense of meaning and really search for poetic devices if you haven't found them yet. Once you've completed this, you should have a thesis ready to be written and plenty of textual evidence to support, because you know how much textual evidence is important, I hope. Lastly, you make sure that you're confident in your reasoning. So really feel good about that if you've completed all of those steps. I like to think of analyzing a poem as a puzzle. Like poetry, in this case, we're doing poetry, so it'd be more like a puzzle. I need to take all of the small parts, spread them out, and try variations of ideas before I can finally really put it together to create a larger picture of what's going on. So if you can kind of think of it like that, that's helped me a lot with analyzing. All right, well, I believe we're ready for you to see me analyzing here in action. So what I have for you today is Shakespeare's Sonnet 18 called Shall I Compare Thee to a Summer's Day? It's one of my favorites, and if you know me, you know I love Shakespeare because he takes a form of poetry such as a sonnet and he creates parodies and doesn't always follow the rules, of course, with the exception of the iambic pentameter and the rhyme scheme. So, now to well, because I kind of have a lot of background information on Shakespeare, I'm not really going to do any research. Plus, I don't want to take up a ton of your time as you're watching this. However, if I wasn't familiar with the author, then this is what I would do. I could easily put Shakespeare into a Google search, for example, and look for my credible sources to do some reading. Let's read through the poem once to hear for rhythm and a general sense of flow. So here we go. If you want to follow along, I won't follow along with my cursor on everything, but if you want to follow along, go ahead. Shall I compare thee to a summer's day? Thou art more lovely and more temperate. Rough winds do shake the darling buds of May, and summer's leaf hath all too short a date. Sometime too hot the eye of heaven shines, and often is his gold complexion dimmed, and every so fair from far sometimes declined by chance or nature's changing course untrimmed. But the eternal summer shall not fade, nor lose possession of that fair thou owest, nor shall death brag thou wanderest in his shade. When in eternal lines to time thou growest, so long as men can breathe or eyes can see, so long lives this, and this gives life to thee. Now, as you could see, I read that out loud. Even if I were doing this as homework, I would still read it out loud so I could actually hear. Poetry is meant to be spoken out loud so you can really get a sense of appreciation for what the rhythm sounds like. So I would have actually read this out loud if I were doing this as homework. Really annoyed my roommates in college, but helped me to really understand the poem. Now that I've read the poem, let's just make sure I have my poetic devices and the definitions ready to go. And I actually do have that here. You can't see it, but I have it here as a foldable. Can you believe that? Me loving foldables. Anyways, so I have them here in case I need them. So let's take the lines a bit more slowly to look for the poetic devices and the meaning. I personally like to start with the meaning of the poem because it helps me, and sometimes you'll find that you actually get a poetic device in there naturally from there. Now for me to text mark digitally, I'm actually going to change my color of text to red so it really stands out, and I'm going to put my caps locks on so that it very, very well stands out. Now, shall I compare thee to a summer's day? That line's really self-explanatory. I'm thinking it's just a question. Obviously, it's directing to the subject of the poem. Thou art more lovely and more temperate. Well, now, isn't that interesting? So what this is telling me is that oops, I gotta get my font here in the right color. There are flaws in summer days. Can you imagine? So the subject of the poem, is far more lovely and temperate than a summer's day. Rough winds do shake the darling buds of May. So that's kind of like the previous, darn it all, here we go, red. Previous thought, and I'm just going to abbreviate, continued is what I would write. And summer's lease hath all too short a date. I think we can all agree that summer is fleeting. Don't we look forward to that every year? But then it goes away so fast. Okay, then we have sometime too hot. The eye of heaven shines. Just like this last summer, summer is sometimes too hot. Yes, we had a very hot summer, didn't we? And often is his gold complexion dimmed. Now, we didn't have a lot of this this year because of the drought, so summer, but Shakespeare's saying here that summer can also be rainy, which is not very desirable either. And every fair from fair sometime declines by chance or nature's changing course untrimmed. There again, speaking of nature changing and the length of summer, I'm actually not going to leave a note there because I have it up over here. Moving on then, but that eternal summer shall not fade. So in other words, go back up to red here. I'm going to write that the subject's, this is what I'm thinking, the subject's eternal beauty will not go away. Isn't that darling? How honest a portrayal of love here. Nor lose possession of that fair thou, let me see, thou owest. So she will always be beautiful is what I'm thinking. Beautiful. Nor shall death brag thou wanderest in his shade, when in eternal lines 2 times thou growest. So the love and beauty will last forever, and this is the best part of the poem, that the love and beauty will last forever and ever. And how will that last? In this next line, it tells us, when the eternal lines to time thou growest. So it will last forever. And I'm actually going to put this down here because it mentions eternal down here. Will last forever in this poem. That is the best part of the whole poem. Shakespeare is so clever. I'm thinking like so clever because as you can see, he has taken this question, shall I compare thee to a summer's day, up at the top, and he has gone through to compare the subject of the poem to this, and he is saying even though that the summer is short and sometimes it sucks and the summer is beautiful, it's also very short, just like beauty in people also fades. This subject's beauty and the love that he has for the subject will never ever fade because it will live forever in these right here, these eternal lines of the poem. Okay, so this is the last part of the sonnet, the couplet, okay? And this is probably arguably one of my favorite parts of the poem. So long as men can breathe or eyes can see, so long lives this, and this gives life to thee. So what gives the life of what gives life? It's the poem. Okay, so if I were to sum this up in writing, because I'm keeping notes here because I'm going to have to transform this into some kind of a thesis with a paragraph that looks beautiful with textual evidence and all that jazz here, I would say the subject of the poem will never fade because he has immortalized, I like that word, it in a poem. That's phenomenal. I'm going to continue that thought because I can actually transfer this into part of my paragraph later. This very poem is what gives the subject life so many years later. I'm using exclamation points because I am so excited about this, and I'm just gonna put this in because this is like my own personality tier. Oh my goodness. How beautiful is that? How many times do you hear this in everyday language, right? He knows, he being Shakespeare, because he's the writer of the poem, that like art, poetry endures time even though beauty fades. That is remarkable. That is beautiful. That is the most phenomenal thing. And to know and how cool is Shakespeare that he knew this poem would be here in the year of 2012 and 2013, that we're just analyzing this poetry and looking at it. I just think that is so cool. So now that we've gotten the meaning of the poem, we need to look at poetic devices, which I think is super cool. And what I normally do when I text mark is I'll put it in a different color. So right now you notice that I'm in blue, and I'm actually going to label it poetic device. And for me, I realized that metaphor is the overwhelming device in this poem. So I'm just going to briefly here make a note that Shakespeare uses summer as a metaphor. Oops, there. Actually, comparing the subject of the poem. In this case, the subject. Oh my goodness, my types. Oh, that's all right. In this case, what was I going to say now? The subject is far more beautiful and will be immortalized. There we go. Forever in the poem. Because Shakespeare understood the longevity of, we'll just say, of poetry. Isn't that phenomenal? So now here I have, and of course I'm going to do a Control S to save my lovely text marking here. So now I have all the information that I need to actually write up my summary for my homework. Okay, so before I wrap things up, I want to just make you aware of some things to avoid while analyzing poetry, some pitfalls that I learned throughout college and throughout doing this for fun sometimes. First, do not psych yourself out. You know you can do a great job of this. Just keep telling yourself that you're actually more familiar with the poetic devices than what you think, because you listen to it in the songs and the music that you listen to on a day-to-day basis. The next thing I want you to be aware of is that people who avoid looking up words that are unknown tend to have a harder time with analyzing poetry. So if you find that you're really having a difficult time figuring it out and then the meaning, go back and look at those words again. Also, some people like to skip the whole background information. It worked well for me in this case. Obviously, if I'm having problems with it, maybe I don't know as much as I think I know about the author. Maybe I have to go back and actually look it up. So think about that as well. And lastly, don't rush through it. I think that's been my number one error throughout the years in analyzing poetry, has been rushing through it. And then lastly, I'm going to, of course, going back to my original assignment here, I would reread through my notes. And like I said before, just take those notes to create your assignment. I have textual evidence here. I can actually quote these lines if I need to prove what I'm saying here about having it match up with the meaning that I came up with and the poetic device that I came up with. And as I look this over, it looks really great. So if you have any questions, be sure to send a message my way. Otherwise, happy analyzing, and I look forward to reading your responses.